Hello everybody, welcome to the video. My channel name is College Football Frenzy, and today I'm going to be ranking the best rivalries in all of college football. College football has some of the best rivalries in all of American sports. They're intense, they have a lot of history behind it. Some of them have even been created out of wars or bloodshed, so they're very intense rivalries in college football. Many schools have multiple, and there's plenty of rivalries. I decided to rank the top 10 rivalries. I put some honorable mentions in there as well. This will only be current rivalries, so for that reason, Nebraska versus Oklahoma, Texas versus Texas A&M, they'll not be in here. But yeah, I'm going to get started right away. Just talk about the most intense rivalries in all of college sports, or college football, and there's a lot of them. There's some great ones. I'm going to be basing my criteria off of, how good the games have been, or how entertaining, how historical, how much history there's been behind them, how close the series has been, stuff like that. But let's get started. Number 10, Clemson versus South Carolina. So one of the most underrated rivalries in all of college sports, in my opinion. Clemson definitely has been the more dominant team this series, but these two rivals definitely hate each other a lot. They've got some passionate fans. They're both from South Carolina. They hate each other a lot. It's an intense rivalry. I do think Clemson's definitely been the more dominant team, especially lately, but it's a pretty fun rivalry. Again, I didn't put it too high just because, Clemson has been the more dominant team, but it is fun to watch. Number 9, Michigan versus Michigan State. So battle for the Paul Bunyan Trophy. This is not Michigan's primary rival. It's one of their rivals. It's still a big rivalry. These two teams hate each other a lot. Michigan calls Michigan State their little brother, and it sometimes is vice versa as well. So a lot of hatred between these two teams. There's been many great games between these two teams. Obviously, we had the when Michigan fumbled the punt, and Michigan State took it back as time expired, and they scored a touchdown with 0 seconds left. That was just one of the greatest games in the rivalry we've seen. So there's definitely a lot of great football games that have happened because of this series. Michigan definitely has been the more dominant team in the rivalry. I have it at 9 right now, but still, it's a pretty fun rivalry. Number 8, Florida versus Florida State. Another big rivalry. It's not as historical as the last two have been, in my opinion. It's not been going on for as long, but this is a pretty intense rivalry. I mean, it's produced some good games. I believe these two met in the national championship game in the 90s. I feel like each time this happens, either one of the two is a pretty highly ranked team. They've both gone on a lot of championships lately. Florida State's last one was in 2013, I believe, and Florida has had one in 2008, one in 2006. Florida State's also had some, I believe, in the 90s and the early 2000s. So they've won a lot of championships. It's pretty competitive, as you can see. It's not that much of an advantage. Florida does lead, but it's still pretty close. But it's an intense rivalry. These two schools, I don't believe, are that far from each other, but it's an exciting rivalry to see. 7, another rivalry with the Gators. Georgia versus Florida. So another pretty close rivalry. This is a neutral site game at the world's largest cocktail party, obviously. It's in the middle of the season. It's a pretty exciting one. These two teams definitely hate each other a lot. Georgia and Florida are just rivals in pretty much everything, at least for, state-wise. They don't like each other that much, and they both have pretty good football teams. I feel like Florida's definitely had more success with championships, at least lately. But Georgia's definitely a great football team. They nearly won a championship a few years ago. These are two good football teams, though. A lot of intensity. It's exciting to watch. Definitely one of the best SEC rivalries there is. 6, Miami versus Florida State. So another rivalry with a Florida team in here. Actually, two Florida teams. So you can argue that the Florida State rivalry is better than this. I put this one ahead of it. I feel like obviously it's very close. It's exciting. Miami leads 34-30, but it's a pretty good rivalry. These two teams have won their fair share of championships. They're pretty good around like the same time in the early 2000s. But just both good football schools. Miami's definitely gone on a slump lately, but still, pretty hated rivalries. They have pretty good fan bases. I feel like Florida State is a better fan base, but still, It's pretty intense. So I have them at 6 right now. 5, Notre Dame versus USC. So a lot of USC fans, I understand, say UCLA is their biggest rival. Some also say Notre Dame is their biggest rival. So it's like 50-50, I feel like. I put USC versus Notre Dame. I put USC versus Notre Dame here. I feel like it's more entertaining. It's more intense. We've seen more exciting games out of this series. I feel like USC overall has been a more dominant team over UCLA. I just feel like this rivalry is more exciting. You know, in the Pete Carroll years with USC and the Charlie Weiss years, they produced some good games like the Bush Push. There's been a lot of great games in this series. They've won their fair share of national championships, definitely. Both teams have won quite a lot. But it's an exciting rivalry. Two teams with some, great history. It's definitely a fun one. And, even the last few years where USC has didn't come into the game as a very good football team, they've put up a pretty good challenge against Notre Dame. So, pretty good rivalry overall. Number 4, the Red River Showdown. Great sight to see, obviously. Texas leads the series. Oklahoma, though, I feel like has been more dominant lately in the series. But it's an exciting one to see. You got the Crimson and the Burnt Orange on different sides of the field at the Cotton Bowl Stadium in Dallas, Texas. It's really cool sight to see. It's a neutral site game. It's fun. These games are close. It's also known as the Red River Shootout because basically it's a very high-scoring game pretty much each time. Both these teams are pretty good each year usually. It's just exciting to see. It's fun. They've both won their fair share of national championships. I definitely think this is the best rivalry in the Big 12. Just, great history, great place to play at. The fans are both great. It's a really fun rivalry. Number 3, the Army versus Navy game. So I was tempted at putting this at 2. I almost did, but I left it at 3 for now. But Navy versus Army, it's a great rivalry. It's got a lot of history, obviously. Both of these teams definitely respect each other, obviously. They both, they're not like, they don't hate each other. They just respect each other. But obviously, it's a great sight to see. They get their own week to play each other in. Nobody else plays on that week. Game day goes there every year. It's a cool sight to see at Lincoln Financial Field in a neutral site game. There's been some fun ones, there's definitely been some fun ones. Navy leads 61-52, but overall, it's a pretty good series in my opinion. Army had won quite a few, I think, coming into this past season, or at least they had a big streak going. Navy finally broke that and won against Army, but it's been a great season. For these two teams, this is their whole season. Their whole season is just this game. This matters more to some of these fans than winning the national championship. It's just a huge game, and it's a respectful rivalry. But I have them at 3. I just feel like it's fun, it's entertaining. Usually it's a big defensive battle as well, low scoring. It's nice to see. Number 2, the Iron Bowl. Great rivalry here, in-state rivalry between Alabama and Auburn. Listen, it's not number 1, but there's a lot of hate between these two teams. It's definitely produced some great games, like 2013, the Kick 6. This past season was entertaining. There's a lot of hatred for each other. I believe some people have died out of this series, actually. Both teams' fans have killed opposing teams' fans, so they don't like each other. Alabama leads the series overall, obviously. They've especially been more dominant lately, but, Auburn won this past season. So it produces a lot of fun games. That helps it overall. But it's an intense rivalry, great fandom. It's exciting to see. Pretty much everybody watches the Iron Bowl at 3:30 on the Saturday after Thanksgiving. It's great. It's a great game each year. It feels like you never know for certain who's gonna win, no matter how bad one team might be. It's always entertaining. There's a lot of passion that goes into this one. It's just a great game overall. All right, honorable mentions. So, Bedlam, Oklahoma versus Oklahoma State. I did not put this one in. It's just an extremely one-sided rivalry, in my opinion. Oklahoma has dominated, but still overall, it's exciting. The Deep South's oldest rivalry, one that doesn't get much attention, I feel like, but still exciting. Georgia versus Auburn. It's a fun one. It's produced some exciting games, but I don't think that's worthy of a top 10 spot. I just feel like Georgia has bigger rivals, and Auburn does as well. The Civil War, Oregon versus Oregon State, another big rivalry. I feel like Oregon's definitely dominated lately, but still it's fun to watch. LSU versus Alabama. LSU finally beat Alabama. It's pretty intense. A lot of those games are defensive battles, but it's exciting to see. The Holy War, Utah versus BYU. This usually happens early on in the season, but still it's a pretty exciting rivalry. It's fun. The Battle for LA. This is USC's other rivalry with UCLA. It's fun, but I feel like USC's definitely been the more dominant team. The battle for the Golden Boot between LSU and Arkansas. LSU's definitely been the more dominant team lately, but it is a rivalry. Oregon versus Washington, another exciting rivalry. I feel like this isn't either theirs primary rival. Oregon's primary rival is obviously Oregon State. Washington's is Washington State, but it's a pretty big rivalry. It has a lot of implications in who's going to win the Pac-12 North. So it's a big game each year, usually a ranked matchup. Harvard versus Yale, FCS battle. It's exciting to see, although not many people tune in to watch it, unfortunately. And Cal versus Stanford produced one of the greatest moments in college football history with the band on the field. That was fun. That's fun to see. I didn't watch it live, obviously, but it's produced some good games overall. But yeah, those are it for the honorable mentions, and you could definitely argue that some of these games could be on the list. Alright, number 1. Really, without a doubt, it's the game. It is the game. Ohio State versus Michigan. Michigan leads the series. Obviously, Ohio State's been the more dominant team lately. Listen, I'm going to tell you a lot of reasons why this game is number 1. I mean, it's just overwhelmingly the best rivalry in college football. Maybe the best rivalry in all of American sports. It is intense. It is very intense no matter what. It doesn't matter where a team is ranked. There's a lot of hype going into it each year. It's an intense rivalry. Both teams, I will admit, have had their down years. Obviously, Ohio State had the Cooper years where they got dominated by Michigan. And obviously, Michigan's kind of going through their own phase now where they're getting dominated. But it's produced some great games. You look back, I believe it was 2016. That was a fantastic game that went to double overtime. The first few years, Urban was there. There were some good games. Overall, there's been some entertaining games, but obviously the thing that makes this the most exciting rivalry in all of college football is the hatred for each other. The amount of hatred for each other is incredible. I know this because I'm actually an Ohio State fan, but Ohio State, I'll start with them. They hate Michigan. They boycott the letter M the week of the rivalry. I mean, they will cross out every M in Ohio. It's just incredible. Michigan hates Ohio State almost pretty much just as much. I mean, they hate us. I don't think they boycott the letter O, but they still hate us quite a lot. And just overall, there's a lot of hatred. The craziest thing about this is the history. This was born out of a war. This was born out of bloodshed. They actually fought for Toledo. That's how these two states started the rivalry. These two states literally had a war. I've heard people who say the Iron Bowl is the best rivalry say, oh, because the Iron Bowl has had people kill each other, it's the most intense one. No, this has actually had a war. It's definitely the most intense. It was born out of bloodshed. I mean, these two schools absolutely hate each other. It's intense. Losing this game is just like, it's like losing your whole season. As an Ohio State fan, I can't imagine losing to Michigan. It would be terrible. It's just a crazy rivalry, so much intensity. This is your season. I mean, I would hate if this college football season, if the college football season for this upcoming season was canceled due to coronavirus, because that would mean we wouldn't get to beat Michigan again. And that's just how intense it is. We prepare for this thing like 365 days a year. It's just that intense. That's how it is. I mean, I feel like the team sometimes stumble because they're looking ahead to this game. It's just incredibly intense. There's a lot of hype around it. Game day goes here a lot. I just think without a doubt, the game is the best rivalry. But that's it for now, guys. Thank you for joining in. Please make sure to like and subscribe and leave your comments down below.